Got lots of note takers.
Yes. So good morning all. We're just waiting for a few more people to join and we will get started shortly. I can't change the setting now that it's thingy. So you're just going to keep hearing the pinging, but they're coming in. Okay, I think we'll make a start. And hopefully by the time the others finish joining, they'll be able to sort of catch you on the start. So welcome everyone. Thanks for signing up to our webinar. And just a bit of housekeeping to start off with before I sort out the introductions is all your cameras and your microphones are currently on mute, so you cannot unmute them. We'll be able to do that once the question and answer session starts. If you do need to ask any questions during the presentations, please use the Q&A function, not the chat function. It's just easier to check one sort of aid rather than trying to flip between the two of them. So any questions, please put them in the Q&A and we will then ask your questions afterwards. This is also recorded, so if we do put you on screen because you want to ask a question, if you don't want to come out on the screen, obviously, as it's a recording that we're going to share with those that weren't able to attend, then obviously feel free to keep your camera off. So my name is Vima Punde. I'm the co-director for the NIHR Health Tech Research Center in Accelerated Surgical Care. And we are funded by the Department of Health and Social Care in England to generate evidence for new health tech technologies in the surgical space and to also support their development. Part of that involves looking at sustainability as one of our key academic themes. And with that, I'm going to pass over to Pete Calmer, who's one of the co-leads for the sustainability theme. And he's going to talk to you about what you're going to hear today. And he's basically going to lead the rest of the of this webinar from this particular point. So I'll hand it over to you, Pete.
Thanks very much, V. And hi, everyone. So my name is Pete Colmer. I'm a professor in healthcare engineering at the University of Leeds. And as V said, I'm a co-lead of the sustainability theme of the Health Tech Research Centre in Accelerated Surgical Care. And today we're going to sort of talk you through an innovation program. But before I do that, this is very much a collaborative venture. And so we're working closely and have worked closely with colleagues. So we'll do short introductions now. If I hand across to Richard Hall first from PDM.
Thanks, Pete. So my name is Richard Hall from a company called PDM, and PDM is a innovation, design and sustainability consultancy with a large focus on MedTech, working with startups through to multinationals.
And if we go to Rich Shaw next, join the dots.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. So I'm the other Richard at PDM. So Rich Shaw, I'm the sustainability lead, and I'll be working alongside Pete in the delivery of the two Petes. It's pretty easy on the names for this working group. I'll be working on very much on the sustainable innovation aspects of the programme.
Thanks, Rich. And Pete?
Hi, yeah, morning. Pete Waddingham. I'm the Net Zero lead for an organisation called the Health Innovation Network. We try and support innovation into the NHS, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in the section that I do. But yeah, good to see everyone joining this call today.
Fantastic, thanks, Pete. And we're also supported by Adam Peckham Cooper, consultant surgeon, and who's the co-lead with me on the sustainability programme. So we're trying to get a balance and ensure there's surgical expertise alongside the academics. So just an overview then of the session today. We appreciate everyone's time is precious, so we'll keep to the hour session. We do a short introduction just to set the scene, and then we'll give some case studies of the work that each of our organisations have been doing around sustainability, and then a short overview of the programme, what it means, who it's applicable to, and then we'll open to a Q&A. So that's the next hour mapped out. Just to kind of explain how we got here, and you can see here that these overlapping circles, NHS, industry, PPIE and academia, that's something that from the HRC, the Health Tech Research Centre, we really kind of strive to bring in those stakeholders, and that's kind of been something that we're bringing to this innovation programme as well, because each of those voices is so crucial if we're going to work towards improving sustainability. And the landscape, as many of you will know, has been driven by these targets to reach net zero for the NHS, depending on which scope of emissions between 2040 and 2045. So it's a really ambitious target, and that's kind of mirrored by things like the European Green Deal, and we're seeing this extended by other organisations across the world. So it's an increasingly relevant and obviously high priority for healthcare systems to reduce the carbon emissions, but also the waste that they produce, and to work in a more sustainable manner in general. This is driven in turn funding from people like the government and a lot of organisations. So you've got just a snapshot there of the things that are jumping out. Lots more research activity, lots more investment from professional bodies. For example, the Royal College of Surgeons released a really compelling report on green surgery recently. And you can see this activity, this funding, and it's really a call to, in many cases, innovators to bring forward new innovations that can help the NHS and other healthcare organisations meet these ambitious targets. So we know that we need to change our practice, we need to change the kind of tools, instruments we use, the processes that we follow in order to meet these targets. A recurring theme that runs through a lot of this is the circular economy, something that we'll talk to in the case studies, and that was something that was linked in on the green surgery report as well. The idea of not being reliant on single-use commodity items, surgical tools, but actually moving towards something where you can reuse tools again and again, and that extends to things like garments and looking at processes as well. So we've become a wasteful society in many senses, and the circular economy is promoting going back to that idea of being able to use things time and time again, but to do that, it really needs innovation. So that's the backdrop. The work that we've done, and this program in particular, was really kind of catalyzed because the late end of last year, we've been working together. So the HRC working with PDM, working with the Health Innovation Network and other partners as well, to look at knowledge exchange and awareness of things like carbon literacy. So are people aware of the need to address climate change? Are they aware of the impacts of climate change and how that impacts on things like the healthcare system, and actually how the healthcare system is driving things like climate change? So we worked with different stakeholders that I mentioned before. We ran this this course on carbon literacy, and we did that with patient groups, healthcare professionals, and industry participants, and really fascinating insights into people's understanding of this area. What comes out is patient stakeholders, they really want to help drive change. They don't want to necessarily see that as a compromise in terms of their care, so they don't want to decrease in the quality of care, but they do want to help make that change. And that's really crucial because we have people that are engaged and willing to look at new opportunities and new ways of doing things. Similarly, industry partners, and that's how this links in, were also keen, and they understand that things like the NHS Green Plan are going to require them increasingly to evidence their sustainable credentials. But it's not always clear how to go about that. And that's really what this course is, maybe that gap that this is aiming to plug, if you like, or aiming to address. That people are passionate about this area, they want to make changes, but they're not always sure how to go about that. And the idea is that we can help signpost along the way. So moving on from the background, just to some case studies now, to give you an idea of the kind of things that we've been working on, and I suppose, showcase the kind of work and the kind of skills that we bring to this program. And it hopefully illustrates opportunities for change as well. So within the HRC, some of the work that we've done, and this is some work led by Adam, in terms of looking at circular surgery. So I mentioned before this real reliance on things like single-use equipment. So you can see a mock-up that we did here in the anatomy lab at the university of a lap chole, a lap cholecystectomy. And you can see the single-use version there and the equipment stretching into the background. This is the packaging, all of the kind of the different products involved in doing a particular procedure using single-use equipment. And this was essentially standard practice. And so Adam and the team have been working on what's called tray rationalization. And that's really to kind of look at how we can take the same procedure and do it in a much more environmentally sustainable manner. So a lot of those items were single-use plastics. There was things like a kidney bowl that you put things in. Actually, they've had stainless steel versions of those for years and years and years. So there's some simple changes, and there's some other changes in terms of, do you really need all the equipment or the instruments in a particular tray? Perhaps you don't, and in which case you can rationalize them. You can reduce the number of instruments in that tray, again, reducing waste. You can take different approaches, and you can also take different products which could be, rather than single use, reused time and time again. So you can see the same equipment for the same, or the equipment for the same procedure on the right hand side now, once it's been rationalized into a circular form. So you can see there's a huge reduction in the waste and actually the CO2 that would be emitted from that same procedure. So the challenge is, how do we scale that? How do we do that in different procedures in different institutions? In this case, the work was really pioneering. It was a winner of the Green Surgery Challenge in 2021. It's formed papers, and it's gone on to be used as guidance from the NHS England about how you can go about doing this. But at the moment, this is a very manually intensive process. So some of the things that we're looking to do within the HRC are to streamline that process, streamline understanding of which equipment you need, which you don't, where you can make viable replacements. So looking to kind of put in place innovations to do that and make that much more manageable to do across the NHS. And the savings, or the potential for savings, are huge. Another short example here is a similar theme, looking at the drapes and the gowns they use in theatres. And again, there's been a movement towards single-use things like gowns used in surgical practice. And each of those gowns comes in a plastic bag, and each of those is boxed. And you can see for some of the general paediatric theatres in the LGI, our projections here, and this is showing what we call a material flow diagram. So without going into too much depth, it essentially shows the input items here. So you can see there's PET, so a type of polymer, LDPE. So these different polymers that go into the fabrics. We've got polystyrene, we've got lots of paper for the packaging, and you can see how those raw materials flow through, and essentially what you have is just a very linear track all the way through from distribution, preparation, remove the packaging, and then to the use phase. And you're using, this is over a year, a lot of gowns. So I think it's just shy of 10,000 gowns a year. And the waste, all clinical waste, is huge. If you take a reusable scenario, so exactly the same number of procedures, and so gowns, you can actually really make that so much more efficient. So looking at the similar sort of scales, there's much less input material here because we take those gowns, which are reusable. They still have some packaging, which could be kind of improved, but you have this green loop here, which shows the gowns being recycled or washed and sterilized again and again and again. 75 times is the projection for this particular garment. And so the resultant clinical waste is much, much lower, and the carbon impact, again, is much lower as a result, even when you allow for, and there's good evidence on this, even when you allow for the cleaning and the sterilization process, the CO2 emission is predominantly from this phase where you produce the raw materials and manufacture that garment. It's not from the cleaning and sterilization. So this kind of shows the kind of approach we take in the HRC, trying to do kind of rigorous analysis of systems, trying to really understand and get a full idea of the picture so that we can innovate in terms of processes or in terms of products. Okay, I'm going to move across now and introduce Rich Shaw, who's going to talk to you about some of the work from PDM.
Yeah, Pete. So I've just realised, Pete, these slides all have animations on, so you might have to tab through for me if that's okay.
No problems.
So yeah, I'm Rich Shaw. I'm the sustainability lead from PDM. So we're a design and innovation consultancy based up in North Yorkshire. We've got a studio here in Thirsk and then also office space in Leeds. Is it tabbing on? I can't see it. Oh, there we go. Brilliant.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're very much kind of from a commercial background. So we kind of we work directly with SME startups through to global PLCs, and that's all in and around the sustainable innovation topics. So those organizations, obviously different size and scales, have quite different needs in this space. So startups looking to get funding, get their innovation off the ground, we're kind of working with them to help integrate sustainability approaches into their innovation so that when it reaches the market, it's kind of really fit for that landscape it's moving into and more successful in receiving funding. SMEs very much looking to respond to NHS mandates, things like carbon reduction plans. So how do their emissions stack up and how can they mitigate them in future? And then with the global PLCs, how are they integrating sustainability into their product development pathways in particular? So huge impacts for them due to the size and scale of operation. So yeah, our kind of commercial aspects for the last sort of 2 years have been very much revolved around carbon reduction plans, which really, when you've been through this process, you understand that carbon equals cost. So if you can strip carbon out of your innovation, you can typically strip cost out as well. So really adopting that commercial approach to it. And really, I wanted to highlight this opportunity for startups that you can be very agile and really look to adopt new principles and approaches. You don't have to follow that same path that organizations that are already in the industry are following. You can do things differently, and the NHS is looking for more, in particular, circular solutions. So trying to embed those at those really early stages really can future-proof your innovation once you get to market. So some case studies. So pulling levers. When we talk about, sorry, Pete, I'll wrap up on those. We talk about pulling the levers. There's lots of different ways that you can look to integrate sustainable innovation into your technology. We call it the levers because there's just so many of them. Things like user insights, working with clinicians, how are they actually using the devices? What does the supply chain look like? How are you optimizing the circularity? What are you doing about the packaging? There's kind of multiple levers that you could be pulling. So it's about understanding those and what are most appropriate for you and your innovation. And then quantifying those impacts. So using hotspot analysis, product carbon footprinting, to work at the emission factors associated to your materials, your processes, to build up a picture of what your device is and the impact through emissions that it's creating. So some case studies now. So with an SME, we've been through a carbon reduction plan process to keep them compliant for NHS tenders, and off the back of it, found that 80% of their emissions were within the products they were producing. So in order to meet net zero, we're not going to get there without touching the product. And in this particular case, we were looking at surgical consumables. So in order to minimize the kind of regulatory burden of making significant changes to devices that are already in the market, we were looking at a lightweighting activity to actually try and strip material out of the devices. And in this instance, due to the volume that these were being produced in, a 15% weight reduction equated to a £300,000 per year saving. So when people say, oh, sustainability, it costs more, only if you're doing it wrong. If you're doing it right, it can be a phenomenal cost saving. So this really was a success through this, in particular, the minimal regulatory impacts of making those changes. And the next case study, this was based around baby scale. It's used in primary care. It was being produced in the Far East, and the client was particularly interested in trying to adopt a more circular approach with their device. So at the end of the project, we'd managed to achieve a 26% reduction to the carbon footprint. So we did a product carbon footprint before and after our kind of design and innovation phase. And also a significant reduction in landed cost. So again, it's that carbon and cost reduction activity. Clinical insight was really important into this, that in the predicate device, there was a lot of features which were no longer relevant. You know, care pathways move, they change over time. Features are redundant, we can strip them out and save cost out of the product at the same time. And then optimizing for circularity, so looking at what a product as a service model could look like. So instead of relying on a sales stream, actually relying on more of a recurring revenue stream, such as a subscription service. So having things like products repair, maintenance built into a contract, it's far more stable in terms of revenue and gives you a lot more control of your product and ownership. You can keep it in service for a lot longer. Lightweighting was key in this activity as well, so stripping a lot of weight out, as well as bringing some of the moldings, the large volume injection moldings, bringing them onshore, vastly cut down the shipping volumes coming from Asia, which again was a big contributor to the cost savings. So this is what sustainable innovation is about. It's really about integrating those carbon and cost savings together.
That's perfect. Thank you very much, Rich. Some nice examples there, and I think that, yeah, that idea of a kind of a service model is really crucial. Okay, we'll move across now to Pete, and Pete's going to talk about some of the Health Innovation Network case studies. Over to you, Pete.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so morning. As I said, for those that heard me at the beginning, I'm Pete Waddingham. I'm the Net Zero lead for the Health Innovation Network. We are an organisation across England that tries to find and spread innovation amongst the NHS. We work with industry, innovators and our system partners to try and match those challenges up and those needs, and hopefully try and get some innovation into the NHS on lots of topics. Net zero is one of the topics, but we're involved in lots and lots of different areas. And actually, as we're probably hearing today as well, it's all interwoven. You know, we need to get good patient care, good surgical outcomes, whatever it might be, because we know that good patient care can also be good for the planet. So in terms of the innovation network, I just wanted to show you the 15 on there, and I think that map does that. And we've got a community of interest group on net zero. So what that allows us to do is really share knowledge between us. I've just been on a call this morning with Manchester, Oxford, who else have I been on a call with as well? One of the HINs in the northeast. But that allows us to bring together that knowledge and share that best practice. And I just wanted to briefly say why I'm really delighted to be part of this process as well with the Health Tech Research Centre, because actually we've got a really useful conduit for those innovators that can have an impact on the surgical pathways and rehabilitation pathways. And I hope we can get some really good innovators to be part of this program, to work with us, to work with the HRC, to work with PDM. So that's just a little bit about us and why we connect. And how we connect. And as I said, it's 15 and it allows us to really share that knowledge. So next slide, please. In terms of the case study, I wanted to do it slightly differently, and I wanted to think about funding and give an example of funding as a bit of a case study and wrap up some innovators that we've briefly touched on. But the SBRI has been a really useful conduit to funding. I think everything in the innovation landscape, people are looking for funding to take forward their ideas, to get some more evidence. And there are pots of funding out there. Of course, we'd like to see more, but I just wanted to use the SBRI funding as a bit of a case study and bring to life some of the innovators that have been successful and supported by the Health Innovation Network. Before I do that, as I said, there are pots of money floating around. There is a big NIHR decarbonising health and social care funding pot out at the moment, deadline of March, which probably doesn't unfortunately fit with this programme of work. But please, our job is to try and help you as innovators find that funding, connect with the NHS, allow you to take forward some of those ideas. So I just wanted to bring to life a couple of those organisations, if I can, Peter. So next slide, please. You'll see lots on there. Again, just before I do that, you can see the kind of money that's been around for net zero just in the last couple of years. So just short of £10 million with lots of companies supported and been successful. Now, obviously, those that have been successful, it's great. There have been those that haven't been successful, but that doesn't mean that they still don't have something to offer. And we're actively working with those innovators to look for other opportunities. But actually, there have been some projects that have been funded with this particular funding call. And as I said, I've managed to support some myself, and we've got really good relationships with these companies. So it's really, really useful to find funding. I think the other thing to briefly mention about the SBRI funding as well is that these calls are around net zero, but actually what I haven't shown on this slide is all the other funding calls where net zero is now built into them. So for example, there's been a recent call on stroke where people are coming forward saying we can help the stroke pathway, and the innovation that we've got is a more sustainable way of doing so. So the SBRI are absolutely, as our other funding providers, looking for that net zero narrative, which is brilliant for us and hopefully for you, and we can work with you to make sure you've got that strong case. So next slide, please. So I'll just bring to life a couple of organisations. Revolution Zero, we've probably seen a little clip of them when Pete was talking about reusable surgical gowns and other kind of medical textiles. But a really nice story, I think, is Revolution Zero. They've gone from effectively an idea that they wanted to put and spin on its head reusable PPE. And on that way, they've managed to secure funding to allow them to take forward some of their ideas, some of their decontamination units, which is what the picture is in front of you. It doesn't mean that they are on an easy journey. It doesn't mean they've still not got some hard work ahead of them to try and get this type of way of doing things embedded within the NHS. But the real reason I wanted to highlight Revolution Zero is they have been successful. They're very open and honest with their journey, and I think that's really useful as well. I hope that we and anyone that takes part in this program, we can think about that peer support. I think it's absolutely essential that we kind of talk about other people's journeys, find out how they've gone how they've gone about being successful, or some of the challenges that they had, because I think that learning is massively important. And as I say, Revolution Zero, I think, are a great example of that. Obviously, there's some quantification, there's some benefit there, but I'll let you kind of read that at your own leisure. Next slide, please. A couple more. Definition Health, a surgical platform, a digital tool. I'm a big fan of digital technology. I think it has a place. Again, this piece of work did a great managed to secure some funding, did a great piece of work with that Health Innovation Kent, Surrey, Sussex, and Unity Insights, who did some evaluation to show the return on investments of implementing that digital pathway. So Definition Health and their platform Lifebox looks to help the surgical pathways and to optimize them there. And again, at the bottom, you can see that there's been some quantification of return on investment, carbon saved. And I have seen that piece of work, and actually it's quite a nice piece of work that they've looked at. Just, I know it says about patient travel there, but they've actually looked at a little bit more than that. They've tried to be a bit more granular. So I really like that piece of work. I like Definition Health. Next slide, please. There we go. Thank you. Couple more. Lab Cycle, again, supported by Health Innovation Southwest. You know, a really useful way of recycling lab plastics and turning them into something else after the end of their life. So that circularity agenda really, really important. And again, being successful with the SBRI funding and very relevant to the NHS, and obviously the plastic that that's been used within the NHS. So a nice story there. Next slide, please. Mackwell Health decontamination. We've actually got a few companies that have got different decontamination methods. I can see one of them is on the call, which is brilliant. But actually, thinking differently, thinking about actually the water we use, the chemicals that go into our water, the energy that we use to decontaminate, all needs thinking about. We don't need that, and we don't want that culture of single use, throw it away, incinerate it, etc. So again, I've got a lot of time for Mackwell Health. They're very competent in what they do. They were successful with funding. They've had to go through regulatory approvals, etc. Again, there's a journey there. They're very open and honest with their time and their journey, which is brilliant, because, as I said, there's a lot of learning in there and hurdles to get over to get a product that is potentially usable for the NHS. Next slide, please. I think that might be the last one, actually, or maybe one more.
That is the last one.
Thank you. Thank you.
You want to explain? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, everyone. So hopefully that gives you a nice overview and some snapshots, I guess, into innovation that's been taking place around sustainability, reducing carbon emissions, looking at circularity. And the idea now is to kind of use that to inform this program. And the program comes from our work together and our discussion of these kind of topics, and really kind of highlighting that we know that there's innovations coming through for healthcare, and we know that increasingly, as Pete mentioned, funding will require sustainability to be addressed. So SBRI, if you look at Innovate, many of these funding calls will build in now sustainability, and there's a key requirement that that's addressed. But more broadly, if people are looking to innovate for sustainability, and Rich mentioned very nicely that if you do sustainability right, then it can actually save money in the long term. So your product, your innovation is actually much more appealing for people like the NHS and other healthcare services to adopt. So it should be a win-win situation, but clearly it's not easy to innovate at the moment with this sort of changing landscape and uncertainty around exactly what to do and what frameworks to use. What we're doing then in the program is firstly just to say that this is not intended to be anything like a carbon literacy or a carbon accounting course. There's lots of very good examples of those already out there. What we're trying to do with this course or this program is to really focus on how you can embed sustainability and how you can evidence that within your innovation. So we're looking for innovations that can improve the delivery of health and or improve sustainability within healthcare. And the program is going to be aligned with NHS England's recommendations and the Department of DSHE's Design for Life framework as well. So we're working closely with them to make sure that the program and the activities are aligned well, and they will actually produce at the output things that are useful for innovators to evidence these sustainability claims. So in terms of the expectations, we'd expect applicants onto the program. The idea is that people will apply with a pitch, and we'll have to go through and triage and pick an initial batch of people to work through or work with. And we just need some basic carbon literacy. That's one of the expectations, that you have some understanding of that background. So we're not asking people to have done things like LCAs, but we would understand or expect people to understand things like carbon emissions and broadly the NHS Green Plan. And we really are looking for people who are in development of a healthcare innovation, which is at an early technology readiness level. So early stage innovations is really what we're targeting here, to help people kind of get the foot in the door in terms of funding, in terms of making those next steps. And by building that in early, looking at sustainability, that may really be influential on your business model. So looking at serviceization, if I could say it, and really making sure that sustainability is embedded in your offering. And we want a commitment really from innovators to ensure that they're going to embed sustainability within their practice. As an outcome of going through the programme, we would like each of those innovators to understand then how to integrate sustainability in their offering, and to actually have gone through practical steps to do so. So it's very much designed to be a practical course, not theory, but this is kind of hands-on essentially. We want to see the outputs of people's work. We want people to understand the impact of the net zero targets and the changing greener NHS strategy and the implications for them as they look towards procurement within the NHS. And understanding, which goes hand in hand, your value proposition and how that's impacted by sustainability. So making sure you can develop a value proposition which embeds sustainability as a selling point. And ideally, you should be in a stronger position for funding because you'll have been through the programme, because you will have partnered and been exposed to not just us, but a wider set of partners, which I'll allude to in a second. It provides you with that support network and that guidance to get through this process. We'll continue to support innovations as they progress beyond the programme. And one of the things that we're going to build into the programme is a reflection and feedback session with an expert panel who can help essentially provide a bit of a dragon's den where they'll look through innovations and give you pointers. So we're trying to expose people to those kind of inputs that are really going to help drive their innovation and drive it towards adoption. That's something that we're all really passionate about. So how it would look and how it's going to unveil, this is the first round of the programme. So we're looking for probably about 10 representation from about 10 innovators, and we'll triage the applications that come through. And the first session is designed to be interactive, in person, and at the SurgeTech conference event, which is being held the 3rd and 4th of April. And we're going to run a whole afternoon session during that with the team and all the innovators attending the afternoon session, working together and going through this programme. We'll then have a check-in 4 weeks later, an online session to make it easier for people to fit in and reflect back on progress made since then. And then in June, we'll have a final face-to-face session, bringing in the expert panel, taking feedback from each of the innovators, presenting to the expert panel and looking at continuation planning. So what are your next steps from this point? What additional guidance, help, inputs do you need to make your innovation work and to really ensure that the sustainability angle is covered? We anticipate working with you to help guide follow-on funding applications. So we've mentioned some of those sources already, and to leverage the networks that we work within. So we've got the Health Innovation Network. The HRC is a network across the UK looking at adoption of technologies and innovation within the NHS. And we work closely with the Association of Healthcare Industries and many others who can be instrumental in helping to guide your innovation. And we would like finally to develop case studies from this. So it's mutually beneficial to publish and disseminate some of this work. Clearly there will be some confidentiality issues and we'll work around those, but to develop case studies which can inspire other people in this area. Okay, so I'll bring it now, round that off and bring it up to questions. We've covered a lot of ground in the space of 30 minutes or so. So now the team will be open to taking questions about how the process might work and anything that you might kind of be unsure about as we go through. V, I don't know if there's some in the online. I'm just looking on the Q&A tab.
Yeah, so there's one question from Dean. Great presentation. We solved the problem of NHS wasting millions on single-use RPE and annual landfill by replacing them with reusable surgical masks and reusable half-mask respirators. And currently running trial is at an NHS trust. but NHS supply chain has no reusable framework, and we've been told a reusable framework is unlikely for the foreseeable future. Who can we work with at the NHS for procurement of circular solutions? So I don't know who wants to take that.
I mean, I can touch on it and then maybe hand across to. So I think Revolution Zero is a nice example here where they've worked within existing frameworks within the NHS, and I do appreciate that the supply chain is moving slowly, but actually their offering, while it's circular, is also financially beneficial for those trusts that adopt it. So they have an economic argument there that the NHS should adopt their offering of reusable drapes and gowns. So while the supply chain and the procurement processes, they are changing and there are plans to change them, but that might be a slower process. There is movement within individual trusts, and there is a kind of a recognition that circularity is important. So if you can make it commercially viable, I think you have a very strong argument for procurement. So that would be my take on it, but I don't know if any others want to contribute.
Yeah, I mean, just before anybody else contributes, Dean's also added that they already work with Revolution Zero, but there's still no framework for RPE. So that's just to add on to that. Yeah.
I might just add a couple of comments. I know Dean as well. I think the phrase that I didn't use in my presentation, but I've probably mentioned it to you before, Dean, is that the Health Innovation Network help innovators navigate the nuances of the NHS. We have to accept that the NHS does have nuances. Procurement is challenging to navigate. NHS supply chain are one of many procurement organisations within the NHS. Obviously, they're a key partner. So I think we probably just need to keep getting under the skin of that a little bit more, which I know that you have done, and I think you're working with North East North Cumbria as well, just on that challenge. But I think for me, Peter, the benefit as well of having a program like this is, you know, you're well connected with Leeds, who are a big acute trust with lots of procurement experts in house, and I think sometimes we just need to ask these questions internally of our partners and of our trusts, and bring some of this to the forefront, really, and try and find, you know, in the absence of like a reusable framework, does that prevent things being taken forward, and just get under the skin of that a little bit more. So I always like people to be honest with the challenges, because unless we're honest, we then can't try and fix it. But it's not an easy task. And I think sometimes people just want, you know, that one key to the castle, that one simple way of getting into the NHS, and unfortunately it's not always like that. As I said, there are nuances, but you know, we'll hopefully can help you navigate. But thank you for your question, and hopefully we can connect and just start unpicking this a bit more.
Brilliant. Thanks,
Okay.
Pete.
Thank you. So the next one is from Adam Jones. Do innovators have to be individuals to apply, or can pairs, teams apply to this program?
No, that's a great question, and we're looking for representation from about 10 innovations. So it could be from an individual. You may have a great idea and you're developing that, and maybe you're looking to identify other people to get on board as well, or it could be from teams. So we're kind of open to either. And I think when we run this, we just want to make sure we have the right people in the room. The innovators are in the room. So whether it be a sole person, or if there's a team of you, we might ask for representation from a couple of you to come to the program.
Okay, great. Then we've got Hattie from Lighthearted. She says, many thanks for the webinar, very interesting. At Lighthearted, we're a medical device startup looking to apply for SBRI funding. We are finalizing our hardware product for CE marking, but don't yet have a supply chain or manufacturing setup. What net zero related activities should we be specifying within the grant at this stage? How is it best to start road mapping our alignment with net zero? And what tasks and activities can you suggest to start with? So I know there's a lot of multiple questions in one.
Really?
So so you can start off with what net zero related activities should they be specifying, and then I can sort of break it down further.
Yeah, so I guess this is probably prime for the actual this is exactly the kind of thing we would be covering within the program. So we probably don't want to give too much away, but yeah, I think Rich, you're a great person to to respond because it's firmly in your territory there.
Yeah, I think if you're at a stage where you're already working on your CE mark, you're probably well through the TRLs. But if you're not yet kind of into that manufacture pathway, I think there's still an opportunity. And this is why we're trying to capture people at the TRL 2s and 3s and 4s, is because you don't want to have to go backwards and try and rework sustainability into what you've been doing. So given the stage that you're at, I would say as a bare minimum, go and look at the net zero roadmap from the NHS. What is going to be expected at the point of procurement? The tender questions will in funding will often point to things like, are you aligned with the net zero roadmap? Do you understand your carbon emissions, scope 1, 2 and 3? All those aspects are really good to get your head around and start working those into kind of your value proposition. So yeah, I think I would probably start there. And yeah, through the point of manufacture, you can still look at nearshoring, keeping your supply chain small, trying to optimize things like your packaging, keeping that as low as possible. All these kinds of things would start building up some evidence into what you are doing in support of your innovation. I hope that helps.
That's perfect. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you. So next is Gavin Cassidy. We are a Portuguese nitrile glove manufacturer and offer an excellent alternative to gloves manufactured in the Far East. However, we need help highlighting how much NHS hospitals can reduce their carbon emissions via gloves from China, Malaysia, etc. Thank you.
So I think this would be where we would look to help work with you and point you towards the right kind of tools. So like life cycle analysis, looking at carbon emissions. So there will be some reductions, I would imagine, from the transportation difference, but also you can play to the fact that there's modern day slave kind of regulations coming in. So there's recognition that, as you say, the gloves produced in, say, China and Malaysia, the conditions aren't always good. So there's other aspects that you could look at here as well. And there's also supply chain resilience by kind of minimizing the distance. There's potential improvements for people at the NHS if they have a supplier which is closer to them. So I think those are all things that we would work through in the program. But yeah, really good point.
Okay. So next we've got Simon Hall from Airway Medical. Although Pete highlighted SBRI funding, in that the funding was cut by SBRI from over 6 million to about 2.5 or 1.5. In the same period, NHSX increased funding from over 30 million pounds for digital infrastructure increases, including AI, that will add significantly to the carbon footprint. What signal is this sending to innovators about NHS priorities?
An interesting one, Pete. I don't know if you're there. I know this is one of your areas of. I mean, it's a very complex one.
I'd probably give the question a bit of a miss, if that's okay, because I don't want to kind of comment on government funding too much. I feel everyone's frustrations. I think with everything in life, I like the idea of being creative. I mean, you have highlighted where the funding is, but that doesn't mean that funding can't be used to benefit the planet and the people. So for me, I'll keep out of budget setting from the government or the NHS. However, as we've said in the slides, there are other pots of money that might not be badged as net zero, or that they could help you depending on where you are on your journey to innovate, to do your design work. And I think you've mentioned Eye for Eye, haven't you, on one of your slides, Peter? So there are other funding pots, and like any program, we want to try and help you find those. It's not an easy landscape to navigate as the funding landscape either. So
yeah, Rich, is it a current hand?
I think a couple of things. I think the AI thing, it's here to stay and it will transform healthcare. Yes, it's very energy intensive at the moment, but that will change, I'm sure. It'll become less energy intensive. But I think ultimately what things like AI and digital tools can serve is to rapidly reduce or improved kind of patient throughput within the NHS, shorten waiting lists, and kind of transform outcomes off the back of it. So yeah, it's all part of that digital transformation, which, you know, is kind of a generational thing that we're going through right now. So yeah, it's frustrating. I do get it if that doesn't kind of sit squarely within what your innovation does. So the best you can do is try and embed sustainability, look for the cores which are most appropriate to where your innovation sits.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we've also seen this week has been quite disruptive in terms of AI, particularly if you're NVIDIA. So there potentially is the opportunity to look at AI with a reduced carbon footprint. But yeah, I guess that's a whole another area. Are there any other questions coming through? Anybody would like to speak?
Yeah, no other questions. I don't know if if someone in the audience, if you want to us to make you live and ask something, then speak now or forever hold your peace. Put something in the chat, and then we can unmute you on our end. But whilst you're deciding on that, I don't know whether, Pete, you want to sort of talk through what happens next once we close this webinar.
Yeah, so I think at this point we're going to open up an application form for people to express interest in joining the program. And as I said, that's the information that we'll collate there is something that we then triage to understand the range of innovations that are being that are represented here today, and select about 10 innovators to work with on the program, and would invite you to join us and look for commitment to those sessions that you can see here. So the announcement will go out. I think we just need to coordinate, but we'll send direct information to everybody who's online today, and also put this on LinkedIn as well. So we'll have a short form for you to briefly state what your innovation is, why you think you should be on the program, why it's relevant, and what you'd like to get from the program. If this works well, then we would run this in in batches, if you like. So this is the first round that we're doing, but we're really looking to see the interest here and the innovations that are coming through, get a good representation. And if I just go back to the previous slide, if you think you fall into this area of having an early stage innovation, you're looking to identify follow-on funding, next steps, get linked in towards procurement, and you're really committed to embedding sustainability in your practice, then please do apply. We really want to hear from you. We really want to see what your innovation is and work with you on that. I think that's about it, V. I think that, has anybody got any other bits to add?
Okay, let's see. Someone's put their hand up. Just hang on a second. I don't know. Well, it's showing one person in the activity. It's showing something for somebody, but I can't see it.
I can't see. No, I don't think anybody is. I know. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll make this recording available, and I think we can make a copy of the slides. Most of the slides available as well for participants. So as a record of the event. So I think then we'll close and just thank you all for coming today, for joining and hearing about the innovation program. Really excited to hear from you in next steps. So thank you for your time and have a lovely weekend.
Okay, cool. So thank you all.
Thanks all.